oftentimes we see some of the best teams in the country, some of the top programs in the country, and the blue bloods, they end up lower on the returning production. Why? Right. Because they've got studs that are going to the NFL.
Yep.
Ohio State checks in at number 24.
That shocked me.
And so I want to ask about the Buckeyes. And then in particular, it seems like it's more on the defensive side of the ball which when you add in the context of bringing in one of the top defensive coordinators from last season, kind of a bit scary for the rest of the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, assuming I had it all, laid out right, they do lose a couple of defensive linemen that were really good. Really, they were solid. They weren't great up front, obviously, last year. But they do get thinned out a little bit there. Returning production formula doesn't really care about the defensive line. That was one of the biggest shocks when I was really just generally running correlations, trying to figure out the weights to apply to everything. Maybe it's just because the teams with the best defensive lines, like I was talking about with recruiting, maybe it's just that they always have the best defensive lines and therefore it doesn't end up mattering all that much in that regard. But being that returning production doesn't really care all that much about the line, in fact, they return the top 4 linebackers, it looks like, top 5 defensive backs, plus Tanner McAllister from Oklahoma State. Obviously when they struggled last year, they got shoved around, and there's nothing, they have to prove that that's not going to happen again. Because again, that's where their attrition is here. But it's easy to assume that the defense will be good enough to not get in the way of what should be another incredible offense.
Bill, is an offensive SP plus preseason rating of 48 the highest you can remember in the preseason?
Let's see. Let me see how quickly I can pull this. Based on the new formula, like the new weights and everything, looking back over time. No, wait, I don't have that easily available. Never mind. It's high.
That jumped out to me as like,
it's stupid high. And that was the case. That was why, Ohio State was second in SP plus last year. It's not like it liked their defense all that much, although it only had them in the 20s, I think. But their offense was so far ahead of everyone else's at 47.2. Like the defense didn't really matter. It just assumed they would figure it out. And for the most part, they did. They just, they blew a couple red zone chances against Oregon. And of course the Michigan game got away from them at the end. So they were still a very good football team. And if the defense improves, then what's not to like?
There's a real chance they just score. They just outscore everybody this year. I mean, they if you're a full touchdown better projected offensively than the 5th rated team, that's kind of like back to what we were seeing with that Joe Burrow team for a little while.
And it was funny. I mean, with we could be talking any other team, we'd be talking about like, well, they lose Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. That's a big deal. But I remember joking before the Rose Bowl. I'm like, well, I guess that means Smith and Jigba just has to catch 300 yards worth of passes, and then he did.
Yeah.
And so like if he's going to be that great, not that he's going to average 300 yards a game, but if he's going to really be like the best receiver or very close to it in the country, and then they have like 38 other former 5-star receivers to choose from, like 2 of them are going to come through, and that it's just impossible to even pretend to worry about the receiving core.
So what did your numbers tell you about Michigan, and what does your head tell you about Michigan? Because applying context to looking at this team into 2022 makes these, and number 4 in SP plus, in the how do you look at Michigan, and how do you consider the Wolverines given their current state on the field, but then also on the sidelines?
Right, ignoring the context of everything that's happened since their season ended. The fact that their offense took a big step forward last year and now returns quarterback, I guess not Haskins, but plenty of talent at running back, like basically all the receivers, a good portion of the offensive line. Plus they added the Virginia kid, the center, Oluwatimi. It seems like further improvement is all but guaranteed there on offense, and on defense they lose a ton and should regress a little bit. I think it has them projected down to 19th now, to fall from 10th. So offense gets a little better, defense gets a little worse, and you've got a potential top 5 team again. Obviously, when you add the context, not just the Harbaugh nearly left thing. I mean, that's whatever. Teams, Michael Leach,
McDonald. I mean, like
like that part matters more to me than Harbaugh almost.
Correct.
Like Michael Leach almost left Washington State a million times, and they just kept getting a little better each year. But so that part doesn't matter. But you add, the offensive coordinator who finally kind of got things moving forward just left. And, the defensive coordinator
lit things on fire on the way out.
Right. I can't stay here. They don't care about me. And then, the D coordinator leaving for the NFL, that makes a little more sense, obviously. But no, it took a lot of hires to get that kind of that thing, get the ship righted in Michigan. And now you just lost your two most important hires. If nothing else, it adds volatility. Everything could be perfectly fine, but there's like a greater chance that things could get really weird too.
The other side of the Big Ten West, or the other side of the Big Ten, the West, is interesting here, in that Iowa is like the only team that has really great returning production by P5 standards.
Mm-hmm. I assumed when I saw the production piece that Iowa would be the projected favorite in SP Plus. Then I remembered two things. Number one, SP Plus will never, ever, ever fall out of love with Wisconsin. There's nothing Wisconsin can do that SP Plus wouldn't still put them in the top 10 the next year. They've mastered it, and it's still hilarious to me that like Ken Pomeroy for so many years had the same problem with Wisconsin on the basketball side. It's like the entire athletic department has figured out the best way of saying we're not going to land a ton of blue chippers. Here's what we can land. We have a lot of very lanky athletes that sometimes we can make them 6'7", 320-pound linemen, and sometimes we can make them like 6'8", 220-pound three-point shooters. We know we can get that. We're going to build everything around what we know we can have. And that's extremely admirable, but it does feel like they're always projected higher than I want. The other thing that I wasn't necessarily taking into account with Iowa is how much SP Plus very justifiably hates their offense. They're still, even with that high returning production, they're still projected only 26th. And they're third on defense and 74th on offense. It's they insist on running the ball even though they can't. They don't, even though Ferentz isn't actually all that bad on like fourth downs and whatnot. It's lowest common denominator stuff, and they're not very good at it. And if they don't have a plus 15 or whatever turnover margin, they're going to go 8-4. And so I was a little surprised by that until I thought a little harder about it. But the division as a whole really is interesting. You've got number 10 Wisconsin, you've got 19 Minnesota, who really should be could continue to improve defensively and might get things back on track a little bit offensively with Ibrahim coming back. You've got Purdue at 27th. You've got Nebraska at 34th. No comment on Nebraska's game management issues and whether that improves, but that's 5 teams within about 6 points of each other. So that's pretty big. Even if Illinois really does fall off the map I didn't realize until I was putting things together how much they lose from last year. That's going to be a real test in the second year. Even if Illinois doesn't get it together, even if Northwestern doesn't get it together, it could still be a really, really interesting race.
Minnesota almost backdoored its way into the Big Ten championship game with like 4 quarterbacks, no offensive coordinator, and a different scheme every single week.
Yeah.
It was bananas.
Yeah, no, that sneaked up on me a little bit until they really kind of handled Wisconsin. And I'm looking at their schedule again. Like it was only 2 weeks earlier that they had lost, or 3 weeks earlier that they had lost to Illinois. So it's not like it was a massive sustained turnaround, but they really did seem to figure out a lot, especially on defense last year. And if the offense just gets back, even if it's not like the Kirk Soraka peak where they were like 10th in whatever year that was, 2018 or whatever, 2019, I guess.
Yeah.
Even if they're just like a top 40 offense again, that's a really strong team. So should be fun. Even though Wisconsin is at the top, it does bear mentioning that, number 34, Nebraska is only 6 points away from them right now. That's not very much.